Hi, my name is Anjeli Bilong and my matrix number is 2023472348. Our group has chose PETRONAS for their presentation. PETRONAS is known as Petroleum Nasional Berhad, established on August 17, 1974 by the Malaysian government in order to increase the importance of the oil and gas industry in the global economy and the need for Malaysia to have its own national oil and gas company to manage the country's petroleum resources. Our group will be presenting or will be talking about various ratios. The first ratio is about liquidity ratio. Liquidity ratio is to measure the ability of a firm or a company to meet their maturing liabilities without relying on their current asset. As for PETRONAS, the current ratio is the highest or at its peaks in 2018, which is at 7.0423. However, from 2018 until 2022, it gradually decreasing, which is the lowest at 2022 at 3.6903. Although we can see from the graph, PETRONAS have a steadily decreasing value, but PETRONAS still able to pay their short-term liquidity. Moving on onto the net working capital, PETRONAS have 3,979,693 ringgit in the year of 2018, and it increased to 4,124,000 ringgit and 965 in the years of 2019. However, it plumped down or it decreased to 2,929,206 ringgit in the years of 2020, and it rose up a bit to 3,422,326 ringgit in the years of 2021, and it rose up a bit again to 3,703,246 ringgit in the year of 2022. Net working capital is to measure the company excess funds or liquid assets available after they are paying its daily operating obligation. It is shown that PETRONAS does have much more net working capital after paying their own obligation. And the last one in liquidity ratio is quick ratio. For PETRONAS in 2018, it is at 6.9411. It is the highest or at its peaks. Then it dropped down to 5.896 in 2019, and it's steadily decreasing until 2022, which is at 3.6594. As I said, even though PETRONAS have a steadily decreasing value, however, they still meet up or they're still able to pay their short-term ability without relying on their current asset.
Now we are moving on to the activity ratio, but before we're going deep into that, what is even an activity ratio? An activity ratio is a financial metric which indicates the efficiency of the company in leveraging the assets in the balance sheet in terms of generating the revenues and cash. Now moving on to the account receivable turnover ratio. This measures the company's ability to collect debts or credit sales, for instance receivable from the customers. On top of that, average collection period is included as well. This means that it measures the average days taken by the company to collect credit sales. In other words, the shorter the ACP, the better the company collecting debts within shorter period. As you can see from both of my sides, these two are the line graphs of the ratios that I mentioned earlier, which is the data that we have been collected from the year of 2018 to the year of 2022.
Second is fixed asset turnover, FATO. It measures the company efficiency in using only fixed assets to produce goods or product for sales. The higher the FATO is the better. Based on the graph, the highest is in year 2022, which is 0.4217, and the lowest is in year 2019, which is 0.3772. It reveals that PETRONAS is using its fixed asset effectively starting from 2018 and more efficiently from 2019 to 2022 to generate sales. Next is total asset turnover, TATO. It measures the company efficiency in using all resources or assets to generate sales. The higher the TATO is better the company in using fixed asset to generate sales. As you can see, the highest total asset turnover is in 2022, which is 0.3129, while the lowest is in 2019, which is 0.2787. Based on the graph, we can see that PETRONAS could manage its asset more efficiently in 2022 as they are using its resources productively. Now Now let's move to ITO, inventory turnover ratio. It measures the company abilities to use inventory to generate sales. As you can see from the graph, the highest inventory turnover ratio is 39.551N, which is in year 2022, and the lowest is 39.2973 in year 2019. We can see that PETRONAS sales are good in a given period.
We go to our next topic, which is a leverage ratio, which is have three ratio, which is debt ratio, debt to equity ratio, and time interest year. Which is we go to the first one, which is debt ratio. From the graph, based on the graph, the debt ratio for PETRONAS has been changed from 2018 until 2022. The debt ratio for PETRONAS show the increase from 2018 until 2019, and the decrease from 2019 until 2020. And after that, the debt ratio was increased from 2020 until 2022 with small percent. In 2018, the company will have a lowest debt ratio, which is 27.7725%, while the higher ratio is 31.8896%, which is in 2022. This shows the company have a position to hold all the debt and be ready to make quick payment if needed. Next we go to debt to equity ratio. Based on the graph, the derivative show the debt to equity ratio for PETRONAS increased from 2018 until 2019, and after that decreased from 2019 until 2020, and then from 2020 until 2022 it show increase debt to equity ratio. As we can see from the graph, the highest debt to equity is in 2022, which is 46.22085%, while meanwhile the lowest percent is in 2018, which is 38.4514%. This indicate the starting from the year of 2018 until 2022 shows that PETRONAS have better change for pay back its borrowings and interest change compared to the other years. Last, we go to time interest yearly. Based on the graph in the graph, we clearly see that in 2018 until 2019 it decreased, and after that the time interest year ratio increased in 2019 until 2021, and decreased again from 2021 until 2022. The highest time interest year was in 2021, which is 50.1988 times, and the lowest time interest year was in 2019 with 11.1277 times. This means that PETRONAS have more change and ability in fulfilling interest obligation.
Hence, gross profit margin is included as well. This means that the percentage of sale remaining in after deducting the cost of making sales. The higher the ratio, the more goods the company is at controlling its cost of goods sold. Next is net profit margin. In this case, the company measures the profit generated from sales after deducting the administrative expenses, interest expenses, and tax expenses. The higher the NPM, the better the company is in generating the net profit, or PAT/EAT. You are now seeing the two graphs of the ratios that I mentioned earlier from both of my sides, which is the data that we have collected in generation from the year of 2018 until the year of 2022.
This brings us to our next topic, which is the profitability ratio for PETRONAS over 5 years, including operating profit margin, return on asset, and return on equity. Let's take a look at the slide, which shows us the operating profit margin first. As we refer to the data, in 2020, the operating profit margin of PETRONAS Gas Berhad is the highest, which is 47.7493%. Meanwhile, in 2022, it has decreased to 37.6626%, which is the lowest net profit margin for the list company. As in the graph, it shows the operating profit margin decreased from 2018 to 2019. Then it started increasing from 2019 to 2020. Even so, it decreased back from 2020 to 2022. This shows that in 2022, the company is making a loss rather than having a high profit. This may occur due to the different financing strategy used or operating problems. Moving on, we have the return on asset. Based on the graph, we can see that the PETRONAS Gas Berhad has had an inconsistent trend in return on asset for 5 years consecutively. The return on asset of the company decreased from 2018 until 2019 and started increasing from 2019 to 2020. Then it decreased back from 2020 until 2022. The lowest return on asset is 8.9315% in 2022, while the highest value is 2020, which is 11.3509%. It indicates that in 2020 until 2022, the company will not be able to make profit and less efficiency in its asset utilization. Now, I'd like to direct your attention to our return on equity. As we can see, the return on equity for PETRONAS gas berhad from 2018 to 2020 increases for 3 years with a big change in value, but then it decreases from 2020 to 2022. The lowest return equity is 13.1133% in 2022, while the highest return equity in 2020 is 16.0564%. As a result, the company does have the ability to return the profit to the shareholders from their investment in 2020 rather than in 2022. Other than that, they do not improve from 2020 to 2022 and have a low growth of the company for 3 years.
Hi, for the second part of our presentation, we'll be doing a comparative analysis between two companies at the same industry, which are PETRONAS and PETRON. In liquidity ratio, we will still talking about the same ratio, which is current net working capital and quick ratio. Let us move to the first current ratio. Current ratio shows that PETRONAS has a high ratio, which is at 3.6903 rather than PETRON, which is 1.1017. The higher the current ratio, the better. This shows us that PETRONAS can pay its creditor easier than PETRON. Moving on to the next ratio is about net working capital. Here we also can see that PETRONAS has a high net working capital also, which is at 3,703,246 ringgit rather than PETRON, which is only 2,334 ringgit. The higher the net working capital, the more liquid the company have. PETRONAS have more access or liquid fund available after paying its daily operation obligation. However, PETRON does not have even more than 1 million, show that PETRON has more debts. And the last one is about quick ratio. In quick ratio, PETRONAS has a 3.6594 ratio, and while PETRON has only 0.6383. This shows PETRON has the lowest ratio and may have difficulty to pay their short-term obligation. Having a higher quick ratio indicates that the company's ability to pay short-term obligation without relying on their liquid asset.
The next, comparative analysis between PETRONAS and PETRON, including account receivable turnover ratio. Based from the bar graphs that you have seen right now, the figure displays the credit sales obtained from the PETRONAS and PETRON taken in 2022. Furthermore, the data demonstrates that PETRON collected in about 8.22% more debt than PETRONAS. In other words, PETRON can do effectively enough because of the consumers involved. Finally, the greater the auto, the better the corporation may handle credit sales or debt collections from the clients. Next, I am going to discuss about the bar graphs of average collection period. The graphic indicates the measurement of credit sales over a shorter period of time on typical days. As a result, PETRONAS proved to be more efficient in collecting debts than PETRON by 32.92% in 2022. Overall, the shorter the SCP, the better the organization handles consumer debts on a daily basis.
Based on what we can see from the bar chart between PETRONAS and PETRON, the inventory turnover ratio year 2022 for PETRONAS is higher than PETRON. And as what we can conclude, PETRONAS are selling their products in a timely manner and performing well than PETRON. It means that PETRONAS is way more efficient in using its inventory to generate sales than PETRON for year 2022. Next, the bar chart for fixed asset turnover ratio. As we can see, PETRONAS is lower than PETRON, which means that PETRONAS is not efficiently using its asset. PETRON is more effectively utilizing its existing fixed asset to generate revenue. In conclusion, PETRON is making better use of its fixed asset than PETRONAS. Now we move to total assets turnover bar chart. As we can see, PETRONAS total assets turnover is lower than PETRON. We can conclude that PETRON is making the most of its resources and generating more revenue than PETRONAS. They use its own resources to produce enough net sales revenue than PETRONAS.
PETRON will go the first one, which is a debt ratio. Based on two companies, it shows that PETRONAS have well positioned it to hold all debt and be ready to make quick payment if they need it. But PETRON need, because PETRONAS have a lower debt ratio, which is reduce a potential loss and occur in the event of liquidation. Meanwhile, the PETRON show the higher debt ratio. The PETRONAS will have difficulty in raising additional borrowings and later will also be restricted to grab more loans at the risk of the company may not be able to pay them back on time is higher. From the graph, then the shows that PETRONAS have 31.8896%, while the PETRON have 53.4736% in 2022. Next, we go to comparison between PETRONAS and PETRON in debt to equity ratio. Based on two companies, we can see that PETRONAS have a lot of lower than PETRON. PETRONAS have 46.820%, while the PETRON have 140.93.16%. In conclusion, we can say that PETRONAS has much more capable for payback its debt compared to PETRON. Next, we go to time, which is a time interest year for comparison between PETRON and PETRONAS. Based on two companies, we can see that PETRONAS have more stability compared to PETRON, which is the time interested high time interest year is better than the lower. Time interest year for PETRONAS is 30.0028 times, while meanwhile the PETRON have 7.1426 times. So that means that PETRONAS have more chance and ability to fulfilling interesting operation compared to other company, which is a PETRON.
Next, I am going to discuss about the bar graphs of the gross profit margin. As you can see, the graph illustrates the proportions of sales left after deducting the cost of making sales. In this scenario, it is appeared that PETRONAS is more effective in regulating in expense of goods supplied than PETRON throughout the same year. In a nutshell, PETRONAS has the greatest proportion of sales remaining after deducting its cost of products sold. On top of that, the bar graphs of the net profit margins summarizes the percentage of net profit created by administrative expense, interest expense, including tax expenses. As a result, PETRONAS has the highest ratio of producing profit among the 26.91% of PETRON. In other words, PETRONAS is effective at creating net profit after deducting inexpensive operating.
This brings us to our next topic, which is the comparative analysis between PETRONAS and PETRON in 2022 under profitability ratio. Let's take a look at the slide, which shows us the operating profit margin first. Based on the bar chart, we can see that the operating profit margin for PETRONAS is higher than PETRON in 2022. PETRONAS have 37.6626%, meanwhile PETRON only got 1.73321%. This data shows us that PETRONAS can generate more profit than PETRON. It also shows that the net profit after taxes for PETRON is lower than it should be. Because of that, in order to resolve this problem, PETRON must have a higher net profit after taxes, lower operating expenses or lower interest charge in order to get a higher operating profit margin. Moving on, we have the return on asset. Based on the data from both companies, we can conclude that the return asset of PETRONAS will be lower than PETRON in 2022. PETRON had 11.768%, while PETRONAS only got 8.9315%. This data shows us that PETRON is better than PETRONAS in ability and effectiveness to use its total asset in generating net profits. Even though the return on asset for PETRONAS almost reached 9%, the company is still not able to make profit from the company's investment in asset even though the value increases. Now, I'd like to direct your attention to our return on equity. Based on the bar chart above, we can see that the return on equity for PETRONAS is lower than PETRON in 2022. PETRON had 13.5606%, meanwhile PETRONAS had 13.1133%. Which seem not so much different, but this data actually want to show us that PETRON is better than PETRONAS in ability and effectiveness to use its total equity in generating net profit. It indicates that PETRON had higher growth of the company than PETRONAS, which means the shareholder also able to earn the profit of the company from their investment.
To conclude, the financial analysis gives information about PETRONAS' strengths and problems. It can evaluate which areas of their organization are operating well and which may require improvement by reviewing important financial measures such as sales growth, profitability, and the list goes on. As a matter of fact, we can see that PETRONAS is able to meet its immediate needs without depending on the liquid assets. Nonetheless, PETRON should investigate and resolve the probable sources of the liquidity crisis. That is all from us, and thank you very much.